easier. So, all right. So I also obviously already know the outcome of this because I did actually watch it live this time. But regardless, we're still gonna go over every single match, and we're gonna go over everything. So the fact that I already know the outcome doesn't really matter. So,
Absolutely. We have to see exactly who can come out on top. We're going to game one on Splatzones the Reef. It's the neutral pick between these two.
I just I keep thinking it's not HD because
Supernova
of the
Slaughterhouse
bit rate.
for week 3 of the Transatlantic Splatoon League. And we'll have to see exactly what comes out, but looks like very stable compositions coming in from both.
Okay, so we look at this, and we're gonna look at the specials and the weapons first. So for Supernova, we have the custom Explosher, the Kensa Splatter Shot, the Neo Splash, and the Enzap. And then Slaughterhouse has the Bamboozler, Kensa Machine, the Octoshot, and the Kensa Splatter Shot Jr. So looking at this, it seems as if both teams don't really have. They have some some zone presence. We have Supernova has the Bomb Rush, and Slaughterhouse has the bubblers, the bubble blower. But other than that, they don't really have anything else to rely on painting the zone. We have the Explosher, which exists to poke and sort of paint and provide like follow-up damage or starting damage for literally the other 3 weapons on this entire team. The Bamboozler on the Slaughterhouse basically fills a role of trying to be a Slayer or applying pressure. And the other ones, I mean, the Machine is just a poke god. But the rest of it just seems sort of basic. I would say looking at this, it's hard to say. I think the amount of the advantage that Slaughterhouse could have with the bubble blower heavily relies on whether or not Keen is focused. If Keen is focused to the point where he has to use his bubble blower to save himself, or use them in bad situations like not even painting to the zone, or he just straight up loses them by dying with them, then the advantage absolutely goes to Supernova because a bomb rush is just so much easier to get value out of, as you can just break a bubble blower, you can just shoot it, but you can't really do a whole lot about a bomb rush. The only thing they could do to stop the bomb rush would have the Machine blow his splashdown just to try and break a few of them. But I would say the advantage technically goes to Supernova, but Slaughterhouse could easily make this a bit more painful if Keen is allowed to stay alive and is able to farm his bubbles. And for like actual fighting potential, I think Supernova definitely still has a better frontline like fighting comp as opposed to Slaughterhouse. You didn't miss anything. I haven't even really started, but overall, I definitely think Supernova has a much better comp here, but it heavily relies on whether or not Keen is kept at bay. If Keen is allowed to just farm his bubble blowers, then it could be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, very stable composition. We're going to see the Explosion Custom, which is definitely really an interesting pick here. Going for that bridge control potentially and holding that strong. We're going to see, well, obviously you're going to have a nice little bit of early play. But
So one thing that I noticed when watching this, and you can see just from Keen's POV, is Supernova had no zone presence. Keen was able to hold right tree by himself and had basically no one contesting him, so he just got a free cap on the zone, which is a bit of them listening to some of the feedback I provided them prior, or looking back at some scrims where we were talking about Slaughterhouse's preference to rush bridge immediately. So it seems as if way too many people were trying to play bridge or to keep an eye on it, and nobody was taking presence on either side. No tree was being taken control of, so it allowed Keen to not only get his bubbles for free, but to get both points for free.
Moving forward, the armor comes in just a little bit too late, and Zero goes down. Arashi goes down as well, thanks to the bubble combination on that side. One is going to find one.
And one with a good play. Making the correct call to not try and fight that inkjet, especially because he was already weak, so trying to fight that would have been very dangerous.
it's going to be the case that Slaughterhouse is going to need to build up their specials to push back.
Supernova having control of the
Yeah, see, this is one of the missiles don't on Reef are kind of bad because it's so easy to avoid the missiles just by hiding underneath the bridge.
15 seconds skirmish.
So I don't think missiles are really good here. You could also technically hide underneath the trees to stop missiles as well.
One but doesn't quite get it. And
With Taylor going with a bit of an aggressive inkjet, gets pretty easily punished. Power going in there to help him. This is what I was talking about, where Keen is, if Keen is forced to use his bubble blower in an unoptimal situation, where all he did was use it to, just try and make sure that he could like make the fight equal. He already lost 2 people. He lost Taylor in power, so he tried to equalize by using his bubble blower. But it's not a very good use of it when your bubble blower is your only actual way of taking the point. And the commentators mentioned there that why is Supernova going for kills and not trying to cap? It's actually better to ensure that you win the fight. It's much like losing the lead isn't a big deal to lose the lead as long as you win the fight. And it's same thing like that. Like, it doesn't matter that they weren't getting points. If they won the fight, it makes it easier to make sure that they can hold the point for longer.
I don't think that was a great fight.
Perhaps not. I mean, it doesn't really seem to amount to much of anything here. As now Wancho's going to be able to punish back the other direction, gets a double at the very least. Soldier's going to go down there. And now, again, Supernova has control of the zones. This is the strongest they've looked all game. If you look at the amount of yellow ink that's all around the map right now.
Yeah, and then Keen was just completely out of position there. I don't know what he was doing on that side. It's it's very difficult to see reasonings and positioning from this POV, but it's also better to watch this than the overhead view.
They go up 1-0 in this series.
What the hell was Keen doing? He was literally in their spawn with the junior. What was the problem?
I definitely Slaughterhouse had a better start simply because no one was contesting the zones, which allowed Keen to get them for free like that. And they had a good first few fights, but then it became an issue where Keen was just not able to use his bubble blower effectively and to be able to actually use them for the zone. And with that being their only real way of capping easily, it makes it hard for them to get back in. The only specials they have are the inkjet, the missiles, a splashdown. Inkjet and splashdown are more or less just putting a target on your back, asking people to kill you. And then missiles are only really useful for figuring out where people are moving or where the enemy is positioned. So unless you try to immediately act on missiles, it's not going to help you get a push going.
Yeah, keep an eye on those conveyor belts, by the way, guys, because those are incredibly crucial to the zone control here, and you may be seeing some interesting.
All right, well, so the only change on Supernova's end is having the Kensa 52 instead of the Splash. And then Slaughterhouse has the Squeezer and the, what is it? It has the Tenebrella. So I would say looking at this map, it makes sense to have the 52 and it makes sense to have the Tenebrella because there are some confined spaces where both of these have a utility that allows them to fight in those confined spaces. The 52 has the splash wall for obviously it has a splash wall. It can take advantage of these small choke areas where the splash wall basically covers everything. And the Tenebrella can do the same, but at a bit wider of a gap where it can send the Brella shield through the zones. And both of these just provide essentially the same utility, so I think it makes sense to have the Kensa 52 and the Tenebrella. And then Soldier switches off the machine to be the bubble blower weapon as well. And so I think looking at this, I would say depending on how the Tenebrella gets played here, I definitely think Slaughterhouse has the better comp. It's a lot easier for these weapons, especially with Soldier, how good he is on the Squeezer. He might as well have the fire rate of like a splatter shot, so it's essentially like a longer range splatter shot when they have this comp. And so I definitely think comp wise Slaughterhouse has the advantage over Supernova because it's especially easier for the Tenebrella shield to last longer than any 52 splash wall can. Special wise, I definitely think it is still in Slaughterhouse's favor. Whether or not it again, this is going to become a common occurrence, and I'm going to mention this multiple times. A lot of Slaughterhouse's comps rely on bubble blowers, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's good, especially for zones. And one thing you'll hear me say probably throughout the rest of these games is a key thing to dealing with them is to just focus down the bubble blowers. If they are forced to use them early, die with them, or use them in like really bad spots, and it basically makes it to where they have no value. And when their whole comp revolves around using these bubble blowers, if you make them have a bad usage of them, or make them die with it and make them drop the bubble blower, their whole plan falls apart, because the other specials they have on their comp typically aren't also there to help cap. In this case, they have the Tenet missiles and the Inkjet. Inkjet, we already established, is a target, and missiles are only for information. So they have specials that are just for pressure and capping the zone, but if those two die early, then they have nothing that they can use to cap the zone. So, again, there's nothing wrong with how this is played. If played well, it's really good. But it also means that you have two people on your team, or one person on your team, that already has to have a laser on your forehead. These are the people that need to die, and once they are dead, it is essentially a one fight. It doesn't matter. If it could be still even, it could be 2-2, but when your bubble blower weapons are dead and you don't have any pushing power anymore.
Comp-wise, not too much difference. Power sticking with the bamboo, which I think is a bit of an underutilization there of his weapons. Like, I feel like he could have gone for a charger.
Arashi just doing classic. The Tenebrella falls immediately. Now, this is something I made a note of. It's still 2-2. Arashi is staying back at their zone. 2-2, has armor. I wasn't in the VC, so I don't know what calls are made. But at that situation where it's still even, it would have been perfectly okay for Arashi to invest the ink armor to allow that 2v2 to still... it would be advantage in this 2v2. Because Slaughterhouse doesn't run ink armor. And this is, again, that's another note I made. When you don't have ink armor, you can use your ink armor aggressively, which they could have done there, but just did not. Recognizing when you're still advantaged like that, if you use your ink armor, you become advantaged. So I felt like that was something. I don't understand why they didn't do it, but maybe Arashi was unaware that things were still even.
Once again, playing the scrappy game here with Supernova, they can't quite seem to find all of their ducks in a row in order to push back in. But again, Chara trades back the direction onto Taylor. Once again,
and then Chara is doing a good job holding this position. He can paint both zones, and he can provide a check for both ramps here, or both belts. And then he's at an awkward angle for most of his opponents to hit him. And this is something I kind of wish he would do more. He's playing a version of the Explosher that has the point sensor. And while point sensor itself isn't great, you can still get some form of information from it, and he does not use his point sensors that often, or as often as I feel like he should. They're doing a very good job at punishing Keen's use of hammers. And then here, I'm not quite sure what Keen was planning to do, if he was trying to bait, like fake out that he was going that way, but he was absolutely alone. And then here, Supernova uses their armor and starts to get more aggressive with it, which is good. This is what they should have been doing from at that start, like I said. They're doing a much better job at holding positions here on pit than what we've been doing prior.
opting to go in anyway, and throw their special charge away, which is a bit of an interesting choice.
And then Arashi just goes over here to get armor. Everyone's doing a good job at holding the correct positioning to punish the people that are trying to actually make a push. Zero is acting as a check for the Tenebrella, which is still going mid, punishing the bubble blower. At that point, it doesn't matter if the bubble blower pops and gets the zone or anything. If the user is still dead, then you are still advantaged.
Zero capitalizes on the opportunity, and Supernova takes the lead with a 3-down situation on Slaughterhouse. They might even look for the knockout here.
A good punishing. One thing that they're doing very well is focusing down the Tenebrella once the shield is up.
It's going to be an opportunity here from Slaughterhouse. They do manage to touch the zones, but 2 down already. It's not looking too good. It's going to have to come up big here from Power, and that's not looking like the case. Just Keen left alone in the end.
Yeah, I think a big problem that Slaughterhouse suffered from that one is it seemed as if they were staggering. Keen was too split from them, constantly going main while everyone else was in Overlook. He was just constantly by himself, and then Soldier using bubble blowers. It seems as if they were being used in not solid positions. He did manage to neutralize zones a couple times by doing it, but he was immediately punished for his use of it, as well as Keen's use of the hammer was almost immediately every time punished.
Splat zones on New Albacore Hotel. Once again, the Slaughterhouse pick, and we'll have to see what kinds of adaptations are going to come in. Looks like Taylor going to go over to the Kensa.
Okay, so for Supernova, we have the Kensa, Rapid, the L3D, the custom dually squelchers, and the NZAP. And then Slaughterhouse still has essentially the same comp, minus they have a Kensa Pro instead. So they have missiles, missile booyah bomb, and then doesn't the vanilla Tenebrella also have bubble blower? Versus Baller, Inkjet, Storm, Armor. I definitely think special-wise, Supernova is at a disadvantage. I'm very much in the camp of I don't really think Baller fits in with most special lineups. I don't think Baller really helps, other than just being a survival tool. It doesn't really have any utility outside of being that. Inkjet, we've already established, doesn't really contribute to zone control. Inkstorm, this is not Inkstorm. Oh, it is the Inkstorm one. It could contribute to zone presence, but it's one that you would have to push with. It would be something you would want to pair another special with. Or like you would use Storm at the zone and then use Armor and start moving in with it. I think special-wise, Slaughterhouse definitely has this. I think comp-wise, they probably still have it simply because it's a lot easier the Rapid can be punished by the Bamboozler. It can be punished by the Pro. The L3D can be checked by the Squeezer and the Pro, especially, like I mentioned before, Soldier's really good at the Squeezer, so I would definitely put him in the camp of being able to contest most shooters by himself. The only thing that really on Supernova side that has any form of advantage against Slaughterhouse's comp is the custom dually squelcher. But after it's the last few nerfs it's gotten, it's a lot harder for this thing to stand on its own and be a front line. It kind of has to play back and hang with the rest of its team. But yeah, I think looking at this, definitely Slaughterhouse has the advantage in both comp and specials.
There, so again, a little bit more of a longer range, and we see a little bit of adaptation as well coming out of Supernova.
Yeah, one there with the custom dually squelchers, and we're also going to see Chara on the Rapid and Zero on the L3.
So they did a good job at immediately punishing Power for extending into the zone by himself.
What was I saying about there being a cold engine? I think I might be wrong here.
They didn't. I feel like if they had taken more aggressive presence at the zone, Power probably would have done a bit more. He probably would have gotten kills. But seeing how Supernova played a little bit slower to zone, it meant that Power's play, it seems as if he was banking on them being a bit more aggressive so he could punish them, but Supernova was not playing that aggressively. And then Zero did a really good job at holding the ground there and being able to actually hit the shots, especially that one. And then here, literally the entire enemy, entire Supernova was shooting Keen and making sure that he just 100% died. I definitely think in this part where they should have pushed on their Slaughterhouse's side a bit more aggressively. They saw that there was someone over there. They chose not to chase after him, where it seemed it was certainly an advantage in their favor. And then this is another thing I mentioned in my notes. They lose the zone here because Zero's in spawn, but the thing that comes from doing that is it makes it easier for Supernova as a whole to win that fight. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's fine to lose the zone as long as you win the fight. And by pulling the Bamboozler power away from the fight, like Zero did, he takes away a lot of their damage and makes it to where the remaining people on the team, the Umbrella that doesn't have a ton of, it has a fair bit of damage, but it's not consistent damage. And so that's pretty much the extent of their damage would be the Bamboozler and the sometimes Umbrella. So by taking out the Bamboozler, it makes it easier for them to win the fight. And then this, I feel like Zero was just feeding for a bit here. I think at this point, people start to stagger a little bit too much. Nobody's grouping up here on Supernova's side. People are just like staggering in. Like, what was the point of jumping down here to contest the Pro? The Pro is still going to win that fight. Here's where they make a genuine attempt at trying, actually coordinating the specials to come in together. They use the Storm first, like I said, and then follow it up with the armor. And then a really good play by Taylor to hold his own in a 1v2.
Yeah, I think that cap there was more about making them stop, just knock out. It was boostable. They didn't care about holding it. They just wanted to throw their specials at the zone and cap it. And they did.
Yeah, as the commentators are calling it, seems as if that was. I mean, it was correctly played, but the commentators look at that as a balls to the wall last ditch effort to try and stop the zone. But it was actually because that was the one time so far that was a good coordinated push.
Look at how much pressure that Slaughterhouse was able to apply from safe distances. You notice the bubbles, you commented on.
And then Slaughterhouse actually flanks through their spawn, the Supernova spawn.
Rather well there by Slaughterhouse to make sure that push was shut down. And now, once again, they're in control. It's a 2-down situation for Supernova, and 50-some odd seconds remain. But all of a sudden, now Slaughterhouse in knockout territory. If you look at that timer as well, Supernova really has to start moving forward. Rashi is going to have the incomer at the ready, and it's only a matter of time before that gets pushed. And once you see that, Taylor...
Yeah, this is what I would consider like a balls to the wall last ditch effort push, where they just like ink armor and immediately all jump in the same direction. They push from the same spot. That's what a desperation push is. And then Keen just kind of pops off there. I think the perception of using all of your specials to try and win one fight, I think people's thought process as to that being like a bad thing comes from other games. Like, for example, Overwatch. If you use all 6 of your ults to win one fight, it's not good. You might have won the fight, but ults are a lot harder to get in that game than specials are in here. I think it's perfectly fine to invest 4 specials to win a fight, because once you win that fight, you have the entire map to your control, and you can paint for the specials again. So I don't think the amount of specials you use shows a level of desperation. I think it just shows that you're investing the correct amount. You're investing enough that it needs what's needed to win the fight.
Not going to be about these scrappy fights, because you're going to need to put a coherent push together in order to get
Okay, so we have the Kensa Pro, Kensa Splatter Shot, Vanilla Splash, and the NZAP versus the Custom Jet, the Soda Slosher, the Octo Shot, and the Sorella Umbrella. So we have Baller, Missiles, actually I think, yeah, Baller, Missiles, Inkjet, Armor versus Stingray, Burst Bomb Rush, I'm pretty sure, Inkjet, and Bomb Rush. So for this mode, and especially this map, I think Slaughterhouse absolutely has the special advantage. And I mentioned this in my notes as well, that I think the Neo Splash probably should have been played instead for the Bomb Rush to pop the shield. Looking at this, the only thing that is questionable is the Custom Jet, simply because the map isn't very conducive to super long range like that, but it allows for staying at a very, very safe distance and just pressuring with bombs and ensuring that you are a safe Stingray. Yeah, I didn't even notice he had a Vanilla Splash. Yeah, it should have been the Neo Splash. The only advantage I could see being the reasoning behind using a Vanilla Splash would be that you could use the Toxic Mist to try and slow down the push slightly, because it is very easy for knockouts to happen or very good pushes to happen on skate park. So you could use the mist to try and slow that down, but I definitely think that in every sense of the word, the Neo is better. But yeah, I think overall, Slaughterhouse definitely has a better comp special wise and coverage wise. The Jet can stop the Pro or the Rapid. The Slosher is actually really good here. I just think Slaughterhouse definitely has a better comp overall in this one. Both specials and the overall comp itself does a good job at dealing with almost everything Supernova has. The only thing that Supernova has an advantage is the ink armor, and then the fact that the three shooters can sort of run circles around the Slosher, unless the Slosher is actively trying to pick out people one at a time. And then the Umbrella as well. Umbrella is a bit tricky to play on this map, just because there's so many spots where you could be jumped on. If you're just depending on wherever you're positioned, it's very easy for people to jump on you or come from behind to just kill you through or behind your shield. But I think overall, Slaughterhouse definitely has the better comp.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like this map favors.
The only thing that really needs to be, yeah, even the commentators mentioned that they think it favors Slaughterhouse. I think one of the main important things here is focusing out power and making sure that he can't use his Stingray to stop any push that you attempt. The second you start to, Supernova would have to make their own push. They'd have to make sure that power is either dead or way out of the fight, so that he is either forced to use a Stingray early into the push, or has to rebuild his Stingray while the push is happening.
Players like Juan, like Arashi, and like Zero just are not afraid of. They are not afraid of trying to target that Rainmaker to make sure the push goes nowhere. And that's exactly what I think Zero just did on.
Yeah, like in this case, I don't think the Toxic Mist isn't really doing anything here. It doesn't contribute to this fight. I mean, he threw a Toxic Mist at top mid. It's like, okay. No one was moving there. You throwing a burst bomb would have done so much more. So I don't know. It's a questionable pick. And then in a classic fashion, no push on skate park is a safe push. 39 is good on a vast majority of maps, but no push is safe on skate park. And then Zero flanking power was a good play. And it seems as if it was, I keep mentioning it, is another thing I mentioned in my notes about how it was a good play for him to punish the Stingray to make it easier so Supernova can still stay in a fight and not have to try and constantly move away from the Stingray. It came at it was very risky. If Zero either died or the rest of Supernova died, it very easily could have been a knockout. It was a very risky play. It just so happened to work out in their favor. But I would say I definitely do think Zero made the correct thing of trying to ensure that the Stingray was out of the fight, because it does apply it. It makes it so much harder for Supernova to fight when there's a Stingray happening, because that's just constant damage they're taking, alongside having to risk taking more damage from the people that are actually there taking that fight. And then I also want to mention, I think Power accidentally used Stingray. At least that's what it looked like. It looked like he popped Stingray and then was like squid bagging in place for a bit, so I think he might have accidentally did it.
Yeah, that explosive potential out of Supernova that comes out when the Rainmaker is picked up is kind of scary. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, and Supernova's like, okay, and Slaughterhouse can't do anything. So getting that push past the 30s is going to be quite hard for them.
They're doing the good thing that Supernova is doing that Slaughterhouse wasn't doing here is Supernova is playing slow. While it's very easy to get very far pushes on Skate Park, if you just ensure that you're so advantaged, like they didn't even move from mid until Slaughterhouse was 3 down. They could easily just get a push probably pretty close to the 39 by just rushing it because of how small the map is. But by ensuring that they had that numbers advantage, and the last one being Power with his Stingray, he absolutely is playing far back. They know they can get a good push that way. Their forcing pushes can only get you so much, and it seems as if that's all Slaughterhouse had been doing, is just trying to force pushes to occur, which can still work. I mean, if you just bum rush the enemy, sometimes you can catch them off guard and kill them as the push is occurring. And then Supernova is holding on half pipe, which is the correct play here, because half pipe is the farthest away from the goal as they can possibly get. It makes it easier for them to hold a choke. At this point, Slaughterhouse has to take it through half pipe. There's not enough time for them to go through mid and try to get better positioning on mid. They have to take it half pipe, which for Supernova's comp with they can throw Toxic Mist and just have the Rapid stay at a far enough distance and just poke and poke and poke, where that positioning for their comp worked very well. And in general, I think holding half pipe like that when you have the lead and holding that spot in half pipe is probably the best thing you can do, just because it forces, like I said, it forces the team to push at a very bad spot, because half pipe sucks and nobody wants to push through half pipe. But it also makes it easier for you because it's a choke. You can just hold chokes very easily.
The Tri-Slasher is just used because it's one of those weapons that can just take care of one of these zones almost single-handedly. Another thing that can do that, the Explosher. I expect to see that come out of Char, and indeed we do. Zero switching over to the Nautilus, which is a pick we don't see come out of him.
So now we have the custom Explosher, the custom Nautilus, the Kensa Splattershot, and the NZEP versus Firefin, Squeezer, Octoshot, and Kensa Jr. So again, Slaughterhouse's comp relies a lot on the bubbles. But one adaptation they've made here is by having Power on the Firefin means that in the event that one of their bubble blowers dies, or even if both die, it's still very possible for them to make pushes because they have a bomb rush. And on Supernova side, they have nothing that can nullify a bomb rush. So it basically means they have more push potential with Slaughterhouse's comp. They have literally either of their bubble blower weapons can completely cap a zone by themselves. So even having 2 could be considered a bit much. They have bomb rush that can contest and basically cap any zone with just 2 bombs. So Slaughterhouse has definitely made an adaptation by having this to where their whole push potential and ability to win the zone over Supernova is no longer boiled down to 1 or 2 weapons. Now they have a comp where they can actually make a conscious push together or try to spread out their specials to make it to where they don't have to have a heavy investment to ensure that they can still win. And then Supernova has a very interesting comp. We have the Baller again, the custom Nautilus. What is that even? Isn't that? It's been so long. I think it's Inkjet. And then we have missiles and then armor. And none of those specials scream point presence. So it is Inkjet. So none of Supernova's weapons inherently don't have the same sort of point presence that Slaughterhouse's comp does. The advantage to that is that Supernova's comp focuses more on having their mains and their subs be the point presence instead of being the special. The issue with that is if they lose the point, if they get locked out, it's a lot harder to push into a comp that has Bomb Rush and 2 Bubble Blowers. If you don't cap first and hold first, then trying to contest a Bubble Blower, 2 Bubble Blowers, and a Bomb Rush is just super, super tough. So I think special-wise, Slaughterhouse has the advantage here. Comp-wise, I think Supernova, it's hard to say. I know how this goes, but I think overall, Slaughterhouse definitely has a better comp overall. I think they just have a better comp for this map. Looking at it, they certainly have an advantage in the special department in comparison to Supernova, and I think their weapons overall do a much better job at playing to the map than Supernova's comp does.
Very often, we know that we've seen him play around a lot of these flat links, but the Nautilus coming out here, trying to be a little bit bold.
Yeah, what did I say? No tri-sloshes. It's not been in the meta as of recent. But even though it's so strong,
And then
strong on this map, I think
I mentioned that Arashi, it seemed as Arashi was the one that was trying to rush top by himself, being the first person on top. It's always it's a common thing for, you try to get top control first. The problem is Arashi is the armor weapon, and your armor weapon shouldn't be the one that's trying to take top. It should not be the weapon that's contesting top. It definitely should have been the Splattershot Pro, and Arashi might have been behind him, trailing him. But Arashi was like the one to that position early. He was the first one there. And you don't want your support and ink armor weapon being the first one to die like that. And then here's some interesting play by Zero to be the only person taking this forward and aggressive of a position. No one is here with him. We have now Juan is here, but Zero just held a super aggressive position as a Nautilus by himself and still got 3 people out of it. That's that's some insane level. And then here, Arashi does a really good job at just face rushing Keen's bubbles. He just did not care and just ran at them and killed Keen in them. None of those bubbles popped. Every single one of those, he made some of them smaller, and then he killed Keen inside the one that was actually close to popping, and so it just faded. And then, of course, there it's the example of a single bubble blower can just cap a zone by itself. Solar didn't even need to use all 3 in that zone. I think even one bubble blower, one of his bubbles could have capped the zone by itself. The disadvantage to Slaughterhouse's comp, I think, would have to be that it does rely on having one of those 3 specials as their way of getting into the point. Where as I mentioned, Supernova's advantage is their mains are what they used as point presence, and the mains being a little bit weaker than the specials that Slaughterhouse has. But Slaughterhouse has to have the specials to push in, otherwise their mains don't have as much presence or pressure as their specials do. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about you having the bubble blowers forced or being used in unoptimal or suboptimal situations. Keen jumped down there by himself as a junior to blow his bubble blower to try and cap or to make zone neutral. I don't quite understand it, but maybe maybe he was under the assumption that there were more people there. It definitely, I think that game was very much, it should have been in Slaughterhouse's favor. But Zero playing unexpectedly aggressive like he did, that and then getting away with it was impressive. Arashi did a really good job at punishing the bubble blower. In general, everyone punishing the misused bubble blower, I think was done very well.
They are going to be hopping into the game because I'm not paying attention. We're going to.
And then, so we have Kensa Rapid, Kensa Splattershot, the Octoshot, and the NZEP versus Bamboozler, Kensa Machine, Octoshot, and Kensa Junior. And this is TC. So we have the baller again, the missiles, the inkjet, and the armor versus missiles, splashdown, inkjet, and bubble blower. I think looking at this, Slaughterhouse definitely has the disadvantage when it comes to their special use because the splashdown doesn't really contribute a whole lot in the way of really anything. It's in the same camp. I'd place Splashdown in the same camp as Baller, as being only a panic and being not even good at being a panic anymore. Both have been nerfed so badly that now even using them as a panic, it can still get you killed. Splashdown especially, after they fixed the netcode handling of it, it's just an assured way to die. The Bubble Blower, I don't think... Bubble Blower is definitely not good outside of splat zones and clan blitz, in my opinion. I think its use in tower control and Rainmaker, it's not good. And maybe he didn't feel comfortable playing Tenebrella here, and maybe the Tent and Junior might have been what he's been practicing a whole lot. So maybe Keen felt like, oh, I can't play Tent here, so I'll just go to Junior. I don't know. But I definitely think special-wise, Supernova has it just because they have specials that actually can do something with the map. The only thing that Slaughterhouse has that can really stop a push are the missiles. And that heavily relies on whether or not Supernova stays around long enough to get missiled. If they stay on the tower long enough for the missiles to be on the tower, then it can stop it. Outside of that, they have no real way of stopping the tower itself. The inkjets on both sides are basically just to play the map. There are spots where inkjet is really good here for helping and stopping a push, but the only real stopping power that Slaughterhouse has are the missiles. And then even Supernova has those. And then Supernova also has the Rapid that can stay at a far distance and just poke tower. So even if they don't missile the tower, they still have something that can just pressure people off the tower for free.
The Slaughterhouse pick of Tower Control Mega Mart, they need to win the remainder of these games to take this series back, as we're now on set point for Supernova.
Well, honestly, on tower control, I argue that this is going to be Slaughterhouse's better maps. So I'm expecting more play from Slaughterhouse here. I mean, at least from what I remember from last week, Slaughterhouse performed a lot better on these modes. Even though
so it's very hard to tell, but it seemed it didn't look like Supernova was taking any sort of aggressive angles towards mid or trying to push Slaughterhouse's stack, which gave free positioning to Slaughterhouse to hold mid, and they ended up immediately trading and then trading up, or they ended up trading and then going up one. The advantage is that Supernova seemed to their slow play allowed them to build up their specials to immediately respond by stopping Slaughterhouse's push.
Over there, but nonetheless, we're going to just continue stalling for a little bit more time as we go for a little bit more of these scrappier mid and neutral plays coming in for both of these teams. And now, once again, Slaughterhouse trying to be a little bit more
And then Arashi making a good call that he just needed to jump out. This was a bit of a questionable armor use because Slaughterhouse was 3 down, but it could easily have been Arashi not knowing and not being aware. This is something that I've been telling them to practice, is to always call the numbers. Always say stuff like we're up 1, we're even, we're down 2, we're up 3, things like that, so everyone is aware. Not everyone's looking at the top of the screen. And I feel like maybe somebody just didn't make that call. And if they did, Arashi probably wouldn't have used the armor there, and it could have helped extend their push even farther, so where the point where Slaughterhouse was actually able to fight, they would have the armor to deal with it.
Supernova goes 3 down, and Slaughterhouse is just going to continue this push. They're looking to get past the second judge point, which would be
And what you see here with Slaughterhouse jumping up to Supernova's snipe like that is how you should be playing this map. The moment the tower gets to this point where it starts to turn and go down, that's when you need to be pushing up into the enemy's base. And I'm just going to spoil it. At literally no point does Supernova do the same. They don't take that sort of positioning that Slaughterhouse was, which is weird because Supernova's comp can play so much more aggressively than Slaughterhouse's could. But Slaughterhouse is the one taking the advantage of the aggressive angles and positions when they're the ones running technically the inferior comp.
Probably just looking for that right now. Supernova really doesn't even have that much map control here. You see Zero sharking for a little bit more time. It's going to try to get this unsuspecting drop on the Soldier, and is going to be able to find it.
Zero doing a good job at playing a bit patient, waiting out, because he knows someone's going to try and do it, especially because he saw Soldier down there, so he wanted to see if Soldier was going to actually try and aggress onto the tower. And then we go into what I mentioned earlier. The missiles only really stop the tower if Supernova's on or around it long enough for the tower to be missiled. And that's exactly what happened. They were around long enough for the missiles to target the tower. And so all the missiles were on tower.
I mean, aside from the fact that it was so close to them losing the lead, it was really important that they didn't let them get that checkpoint, even if they did manage to push back further. 2 members now do go down on Slaughterhouse's side, so Supernova are going to look towards taking control again. This is the last minute of the match. They need to start making an impression now.
Just stall for a little bit more time. We really cannot make very many mistakes right now if you're Slaughterhouse. Again, your set life is on the line right now.
This is like just super like staggered play of just trying to take fights. This is something I've always mentioned to him about. You're playing a rapid. The enemy's goal when playing against a rapid is to face rush the rapid to where the rapid isn't at a long distance anymore. But Chara forces that himself. He's the rapid player going in for the close range fights rather than the enemy team trying to force those close range fights against him. He's the one forcing them to occur himself, which I don't understand. And then again, this is an amazing play by both Power and Taylor. And it all started with the missiles being on tower. It forced them to forced Supernova to either take the damage and risk dying, or jumping off and giving Slaughterhouse a chance to actually get back on the tower and start the reset. So Supernova opted to take the damage. And by taking the damage, they are now in the one-shot range of the Bamboozler. And then even if the Power could just be sitting there, I don't have Power as POV, but he could even be just sitting there shooting blanks, just like not even trying to aim at anybody, just shooting to like scare them, like make them jump, like to freak them out, because that's all he really needs to do at that point. Because Taylor is just coming in to shoot them. They're weak, so eventually they're just gonna get one tapped by the Bamboozler anyway. And whoever doesn't get one tapped by the Bamboozler is just going to get 1 or 2 tapped by the splatter shot that's coming from behind.
Again, as you mentioned, another tower control map. Potentially, this is something Slaughterhouse can take advantage of on a neutral pick. As a reminder, Slaughterhouse currently 100% on their counter pick conversion, but they have 0% on any
So we have the Kensa Rapid again, the Kensa Splatter Shot, the Kensa Machine, and the NZAP versus the Firefin, Kensa Machine, or Octoshot, and Kensa Junior. Again, I've already mentioned I don't think the Bubble Blower does a whole lot here on tower control, and I'm not going to fault Keen at all. I think just based on the set, it seems that what he's been practicing is the Junior and the Tenebrella, and I don't know how confident he feels with playing Tenebrella here, so I'm not going to place any fault on him, especially because he's a really good player anyway. The machine can do really good things here. The splashdown isn't really good, but there are so many spots where machine can get some pretty nasty angles on here. So I definitely still think the machine is good and can be played very well here and does a good job at playing this map. And then the Firefin, it allows them to have some range damage. The Bomb Rush doesn't really do a whole lot. You can discourage people from pushing into the tower just by bomb rushing your feet. You can also stop pushes by just bomb rushing the whole tower itself. But I mean, bomb rush is pretty But I mean, I get it because Bamboozler might be a little bit tricky to play here, and the only other real charger you would play would be the Stingray one, and Stingray is kind of tough to get any value on here. And then for Supernova, they don't really have any good specials to stop any push themselves. In fact, they don't even have any, really, other than the missiles, which we've already discussed. They don't have any sort of stopping power, aside from just face rushing with armor, which, again, should be their goal because Slaughterhouse has no armor. They should just be face rushing with their armor. But that would be how they would have to stop any push. Where at least Slaughterhouse has ways to safely stop a push. But I would say overall, I think the comp-wise, it's Slaughterhouse. I think special-wise, it's probably in the advantage of Supernova, even though Supernova themselves still also have a special that isn't very good with the Baller. So both Baller and Bubble Blower, in my opinion, in this situation just don't really exist because neither really contribute a whole ton. But Supernova gets the special advantage because of Ink Armor. And yes, Ink Armor still has that kind of impact.
What do you want to comment on here?
There it is, power with the charger. He's bringing out the charger. He's bringing out the Firefin. So that's the first time in this set I think we've seen it. He's played Bamboo with
I think he
every
played it
other.
once.
You sure?
I think he played it in another game. I could be wrong.
I mean, look, I'm just going off this. This is the first time I've seen it. Maybe
That's
I might
fair.
be blind. But power bringing out the Firefin, and other than that, the looks are the same from both teams. So that's the only difference.
And here, I think I mentioned it that I think Zero probably should have all-in'd on power, simply because it would have been more beneficial to get power out of the fight and risk dying anyway. Zero was very aware that he was in a position where he was risking his life to even continue to try and fight there. And instead of chasing after Power, who was probably going to back up away from him anyway, and might have been an easier kill, he decided to focus on Soldier, who was closer to him, and try to kill Soldier. Which, I mean, if Soldier was alive anyway, or I mean, if he was there anyway, and Zero had gone after Power, Soldier could have still fought him and just sloshed at him while he was climbing the box. But again, we've established how it looked like Zero was already aware that he was a bit too far deep. And then this was something interesting. This play with the Bubble Blower, I think that was actually pretty big brain, and I was impressed by that use of it. And I mentioned how Bubble Blower doesn't have a whole ton of impact on tower control. I think those might actually, like angles like that, spots like that Keen just did, might have some use for protecting the tower like that if more spots like that existed, where he was able to stall the bubbles onto the tower and keep them there because they were against the wall. Not every map allows you to do stuff like that.
But right now, this push is falling apart for Supernova. Okay, I say that Supernova as they look to try to get a little bit more yellow ink on this plat. Bomb rush is
And Power gets focused down while in the middle of his bomb rush.
so that first checkpoint's going to get cleared as Supernova starts to go on forward. But wait, what?
And
Double? That's suction bomb?
Taylor gets a pretty good double off one bomb.
I mean, look, that was a misplay after a misplay on Slaughterhouse's side. Soldier jumping in and Power getting taken out by
It was definitely a situation where Slaughterhouse was getting punished for their mistakes, but Taylor single-handedly won that with a huge big brain splat or suction bomb that I'm pretty sure he knew 1,000% was going to get that value.
Another opportunity, but that second checkpoint still stands for Slaughterhouse right now, which is
And Juan notices somebody out, and then this is bubble blower forced out. They're bad bubbles, so he just bails, which is the correct play. Just bail. You've already made them waste a special that theoretically could stop a push, so just get out of there and make sure you're alive. There's no point in investing anything in that fight anymore, especially because you're not going to win close range with someone that has bubble blower. You should just give up. And then here, like I mentioned, this is the only real way they have to stop any push is to just throw bombs at the tower. And there is an example of Baller having no impact on tower control, is the second any form of damage comes your way, you are no longer on the tower. So while both Keen and Chara basically had specials that had no relevancy here, out of the two specials that had no relevancy, Keen's had slightly better less relevancy because he was able to at least get a few more points than like 2. And Supernova playing once they get down here at the end of Office, they're playing super aggressive. And this is what they needed to be doing because they especially need to get to, someone needed to go right where Power is and try to take the spot away from him. I think that would have been, the next play because they did kill a couple of Slaughterhouse in their spawn. And then trying to push into this spot that Power is in probably should have been, the next go-to spot to get. And Slaughterhouse just kind of has to force the push. But, so that's it. Against every prediction, Supernova won. I do want to mention one thing. At the end of all this, the commentators make a note about how it seemed as if the maps that Slaughterhouse won, they state that it seemed as if they were a fluke. I don't think that's the case. I don't think either of those maps that they won were a fluke. I think those two games were Slaughterhouse's. They adapted and they fixed some of the mistakes they were making, and just played way better. I don't think. I don't think it was you that said it, K-Bot. I don't think you were the one that said they were won by flukes. But the I think it was Dragonudo who said it. But they definitely did not win by fluke. Neither of those games were won by flukes. They definitely played a whole lot better than we did, and they deserved to win those games. So if any of and I don't know if anyone from Slaughterhouse is even going to watch this, but if any of you are, and you watch that and listen to that commentator, I absolutely don't think it was a fluke. You guys definitely played a whole hell of a lot better than we did and deserved those ones. Yeah, Slaughterhouse definitely played very well. I think some of their issues came down to mostly the bubble blower reliance. And I said there's nothing wrong with that, and there really isn't, because it can be very good. I think when you get into maps like this, where Keen is playing the Kensa Junior and has a bubble blower, in tower control, you aren't really doing a whole lot. I think, and I don't know what they've been practicing, the lineups they've been practicing, the weapons they've been practicing. So all I can really look at is the fact that his two weapons here, or I guess three because he had two different types of tent umbrella. It seems as if he was at an impasse of which of the three to play, and it very much came across as he felt like the junior was better suited because he might not be able to play Tenebrella in these situations. The issue with that is the Kensa Junior, outside of splat zones, the bubble blowers don't contribute a whole lot. There really isn't too much that special can do for you. So I think a lot of Slaughterhouse's mistakes came from relying too much on bubble blowers and allowing themselves to be pressured out of them pretty early. And then the comp mistake of running a Kensa Junior when there really wasn't any need for it. Supernova's mistakes came from staggering needlessly, making very bad calls with super jumps, not focusing down the correct targets. People like some of the games where Soldier and Taylor were able to get, Taylor was able to do his thing, just go insane and get a bunch of multi kills. Soldier was able to get away with using his bubble blowers aggressively, and then allowing just like it. A lot of Supernova's mistakes came down to being too easy to read once they were starting to lose. And that's a common issue that I've seen come up, is that it seems as if the team panics, and once they panic, they become so much easier to read. And Slaughterhouse definitely saw that and definitely noticed it and definitely capitalized on it.